This is going to be a little bit of a continuation from the last disc number 2. And I'd spend a little time towards the end discussing my brother Jim. And I thought about it afterwards. There's a couple of things I'd like to mention. One is that several years back, I'd say about 10 years ago, the family was at a party at the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. And I'd invited Keith Romney. He was in a wheelchair with muscular dystrophy. He's my wisest and smartest friend. Unfortunately, he's now deceased. Broke my heart, by the way. We did many things together. I could ask him anything, and he was very good for advice. I like to hear what he had to say. I can't say enough good about Keith Romney. But he asked Jim had to be talking to him, what was it like growing up and being a younger brother to Doug? And he said, just like this, he was mean. Well, Keith told me about that afterwards. And this is made, and which, by the way, I think I probably was mean. So let's say I concurred, unfortunately. Well, several years ago, there's a little Chinese restaurant down in Holiday, just down the hill below from us. And as a crow flies, less than a mile. And this is owned by a husband and wife, and both are from Hong Kong. He's the cook, and he is very good. He's not a gourmet cook, but he's very good. And she runs the front. She knows everybody's name. It's amazing. This lady is smart, short, bow-legged, the whole works. Very, very exceedingly Chinese. So I went in there because it's very convenient to go at that spot. Introduced myself, and I said, now, I want to test you. I want to order a meal or a dish. And if you do it like I say, I want it done, I'll be back. But if you don't, I'm out of here. Oh, we can do anything. You can trust us. Oh, I mean, we can do it. Don't worry. So I told her what I wanted. And I said, maybe you better bring your husband out so he can hear. So the cook's there, and so it was. Well, it came back. Wasn't quite right. And but it was good. So they wanted to know, what do you think? What do you think? And then I told them, well, here's what's wrong. So I said, I'll be back, and I'm going to give you a second chance. Okay. So a week or so later, I'm back. I ordered again. Now, this was quite an improvement, by the way, but wasn't quite there. So I said, you're just about there. So a week later, I'm back in there. I order it. They nail it. And so after that, sometime later, I brought in a friend of mine that I've known for years, much younger than me. I met him in Washington, D.C. He was just a little kid. He threw his arms around my leg, and he squeezed me. He told his dad he wanted to wear cowboy boots just because I was wearing cowboy boots. I want to be just like Doug Snarr. Well, so here he is. He's with me. And she says, Mr. Snarr is mean. He is really mean. I can tell. I know he's mean. When he was a little kid, he was mean. I know. Well, he says, no, he's not mean. He just wants things done the way he wants them done. No, that's beyond that. I'm telling you, he is mean. Well, it seems like everybody that I've taken, a lot of people in there, at the same thing. Mr. Snarr is mean. I want you to know he's mean. I'll bet if she said it once, she said it 25 times. And, but, so it's, I like her. And maybe there's something to that. Well, Jim all of a sudden outgrew me. And he was taller than me. And now we're in high school. And he said, Doug, I put up with you all these years. we're going to have it out now. I said, well, what do you mean, Jim? He said, we're going to have it out. We're going to fight. I said, Jim, you don't have a chance. I'm warning you, Jim. Let's just shake hands. I'll apologize for my past, whatever that might be. Let's just part friends. Nope. I've been waiting for this moment. Well, now, he was quite a bit taller than me, and he had longer arms. But I knew I could take him. And I did take him. And so maybe there's just something to this meanness there. Well, I grew up on this farm, and there was my brother Jim, and then my aunt and Margaret and Dick Snarr, with 3 children. I think I mentioned that. So there's 5 of us, kids. Well, Dick, my uncle, he called me Little Hitler. Now, I'm kind of being honest with you here, but he called me Little Hitler. And he always called me Little Hitler. And one day I was older and I was married and everything else. Now, Dick, why do you call me Little Hitler? He says, well, Doug, that's because you were. So you were so dominating over these other kids. And so I got to confess that I have that let's say, negative side to me that has to be controlled. And as I look back over my life, I think it's been my greatest asset. But I also think it's been my greatest negative. And I had to learn how to shift gears, to when to go into one mode, which is just absolute aggressiveness and refusing to take no for an answer. I just, bang, it was there. I'm not going to take no for an answer. And there's other times I had to be wise and do as Mr. Bush said. You join with them. You're on the same side as they are, and they like you. And that way you negotiate. You do it by persuasion, gentle persuasion. But yet that gentle persuasion is matched with absolute determination and persistence, with a smile on your face, and your voice is dropped. It's softer. And it's not, we're going to do it. It's those 2 extremes. This past week, Carol wanted to go back to Idaho Falls and meet with 2 of her sisters and spend a couple of days. So I said, Carol, you can't drive that alone. 250 miles. I'm going to drive you up. So we got a hotel room overlooking the Idaho Falls. The falls just beautiful. All that water, the falls, absolutely beautiful. In the background is the temple. The background is the stake center. At one time there was the hospital there, which I've already referenced, and my grandfather operated. That was torn down and replaced by a very large stake center. So it's kind of the centerpiece. So it's across on the west side of the hotel, but you could see all that beauty. Well, I made one phone call to Gabby Anderson. Now, Gabby was named after Gabby Hayes. Now, I can't remember, was it Gabby Hayes in the Gene Autry movies, or was it Gabby Hayes in the Roy Rogers movies? But it was in one of those. And Gabby was a character. He became the manager of the boxing team my junior year. So he had to pick up all the towels and had to do this and that and give us massages when we needed it, and on we go. He was fantastic. So he arranged a party. And in that party, there were 4 of us. And of course, I was one. There was Gabby, and there was Dave Hunter, and there was Kent Taylor. All 4 of us are returned missionaries. All 4 of us have remained true, and all 4 of us have had jobs to do. But as I looked at the group, we were in Kent Taylor's house, and I've already mentioned him once before in the previous date, because he gave me a poem. Well, the poem that he sent me which he said characterized me, my approach to life, was the following: ride a wild horse with purple wings and stripes of black and yellow, except his head. His head must be red. Ride a wild horse into the sky. Hold tight to his wings. And before you die, whatever else you leave undone, once, only once, ride a wild horse into the sun. So there we are, in his home. He's sitting in a chair. He had a stroke a little over 3.5 years ago. He's not been able to utter a sound since then. Everything is keen. He knows what you're saying and everything, except he can't talk. And having had a little background in that myself, but only in the context of stuttering, I understand a little bit, the agony that he has been suffering with. Now, David Hunter, who was a stake patriarch and a returned missionary, he and his wife served a mission in London, and very successful businessman in the Idaho Falls area. He can't remember a thing that any of us are saying. It is not Alzheimer's, it is severe dementia. But you could just see how the light wasn't there. Now the other one, Gabby, who arranged everything, he just, from the neck up, he's fantastic. And that's just fine. But he has a cane, but he can't stand up straight. He has to have someone help him, or he can't make it. Now we're all the same age. We were born in 1934, all of us. And then myself. Well, they knew each other because they have lived in Idaho Falls their whole lives. And I knew it was up to me to step forward. Now, I sat next to Kent Taylor's wife, Joyce Hart. She says, I want to sit next to Duck. And the way it was said, I got to sit next to Duck. Well, she lived across the street from Carol. And Carol and I had a relationship. We would go together for 2 weeks and we'd break up. And then Joyce and I'd get together and work out the scheme between us. Then she'd go see Carol, and Carol would calm down. Then we'd have another date. We'd go for 2 weeks, break up. And that kind of seemed to be the pattern. It got a little bit to 3 weeks, and then maybe at the best, a month. But so it was, because it was just who's going to dominate in this relationship. Well, Carol's pretty strong, but she learned it was going to be me, and I believe that's the way it had to be, and should be. And she just molded and matured into that format, and the marriage has been, and the life has been simply blissful. The thing that has influenced my life, my demon, that aberration, and I learned as a mission president, everyone brings into the mission field, these missionaries, a certain amount of baggage. And the whole key is to get above and beyond the baggage. Who will rule, the baggage, or is it going to be you and the Savior? And that's what it boils down to. So there's always a conflict going. And I believe there always will be, because there's two of us. We have a physical body, the brain at the top. Brains can go willy-nilly so easy. They can foul you up so quick, you can't even believe it hardly. It can happen overnight. And then there's the mind. The brain is flesh. The mind is spirit. And it is the core and the center of what you are. Now, the mind can express itself, and you can feel it. The easiest probably is through your conscience. But also, if you become spiritual enough, where you get in tune, you can hear it whisper to you. And that whispering can guide you and can direct you. But it does take real effort. But the Lord will not live our lives for us. We must live it ourselves. And so where that line is, that line of demarcation, I don't know. But I know I have felt it when I have been moved beyond my own powers and what I should do. And that's what it was with Carol. As in the 8th grade, I saw her. That girl is for me. I think it went beyond just looking at her, but something clicked inside deep, the very core, the center of all that I am, which is my spirit body. And that spirit body is a reflection in every single aspect of the physical body. And when I die, the physical body goes in the grave, and the spirit body moves into the next sphere of existence, which is a spirit existence, up until the time of resurrection. Now, this I believe. Well, and so if somehow we are able to submit to that spirit which only deals with truth and not half-truths, Satan can get us with half-truths. It's logical, it makes sense, everything works, but it doesn't, because it's wrong, it's false. And boy, to be able to determine that is not easy. Now, I think I have referenced that. That is, you can't have your cake and eat it too, which means you can't have it both ways. So you have to make a decision. Now, if we want to be tough on this, and I think sometimes we have to be tough on this, because you cannot have it both ways in life, where the Lord revealed to John when he was on the Isle of Patmos, I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou were cold or hot. But since thou art lukewarm, that is in the middle, refusing to make a decision, I shall spew thee out of my mouth. A decision sometimes has got to be made. And it usually is not easy. And it's usually, when you make that decision in the context of what is best, it is beyond the imminent, the immediate. It is in the future. Well, with that as a background, I'd like to enter into the subject of stuttering. And there's many ways I can approach this, but I'm going to go kind of at the beginning and then eventually end up with a philosophy, or what it takes to overcome the impediment in the actual exercises and the theory behind it, which I believe is ultimate truth. I've already discussed first grade stuttering. I have discussed when I had a date with Carol the first time, stuttering at the doorstep, and of introducing Carol to my best friend, Don Bybee, at that time, and the difficulty of saying the name Carol, the hard consonant. And so I substituted a nickname that I could say, Smiley, because it was a true reflection of her. She was just a smiling girl, and always has been. Well, so now where do I enter into this? Well, I enter into this that I was quite a popular kid in school. And I've already told you that I got 4 letters in boxing, but I got 2 additional letters because I was a cheerleader. So I had 6 letters. So that meant I was mixing with the kids. Carol, she got 3, she was cheerleader 3 years in junior high, but her senior year in high school. And so we were cheerleaders together, which helped to kind of seal the deal between us. But the problem of that, and I can't recall if I have told the story, when I was elected cheerleader that senior year. Well, we had two parties. So Carol and I was on one party, kind of like Democrats or Republicans, and then the other party. So they had their team, and we had our team. On the cheerleading part of the party, it was Carol Stanger and Doug Snarr. And I think we were rather a formidable couple in that context. Well, but we had to go on the stage, and we had to give our pitch to all the students in the student body. Now that was really something tough. Now stutters can sing and not stutter. Well, being a cheerleader, that just fits in beautifully. Stutters can scream and not stutter. Being a cheerleader, that just fits in beautifully. And stutters can speak in unison. That's just perfect because stutters can do that in unison with everyone as we're all going through a particular yell. But we had to stand there and introduce ourselves. We're not screaming, we're not yelling, we're just talking to the student body. And they're going to determine who's going to be the cheer queen and the cheer king. So it's my turn. I go first. Now what I had done was I had figured out to introduce a new yell. That's not part of what we have been doing in the past. So I start off trying to explain why I should be, with Carol, the cheerleader. And I am jammed up. I'm having a difficult time. And I know I'm going to lose this ball game right here. And I shifted a gear, and I screamed. I said, "We're going to do a new yell." I yelled it out loud. I was able to say that. Now, I don't know whether I can even recall the yell, except it goes, "IF will shine tonight. IF will shine. IF will shine tonight all down the line. We wear the orange and black. That's a good sign. When the sun goes down and the moon comes up, IF will shine." Now, I introduced that. And I was smart enough to get that typed up and kind of spread around the, let's call it the student body. And they all jumped in. Well, that did it. Carol came on, and she was just Carol. Everybody liked Carol. She just comes across as, "I'm one of you, and you're with me." Carol's genius in this life has always been, even though she comes from a very highly respected family, much, much respected in that community, she never has thought that she's better than anyone, nor does she think she's anything less than anyone. Carol is comfortable within herself because she has that inner deep confidence that she's all right, not better nor less. Now me, I'm a mixed up baggage of stuff. It all depends upon the context. So now she is that even keel. She just levels me out. She brings that dimension that I just simply don't have. Because I come from a very rough and tumble situation. And I've mentioned that before with my mother and so on. Very different. And Jim thinks I'm mean, and on we go. Well, where she came from an environment where she never ever heard an ill word spoken between her two parents. And the kids just loved each other. And they got along just fine. Where mine was different. Somehow there was a spirit of competition within the matrix of my family, particularly with the children. And I think that in a way is tragic. But it's the way it was. Carol did not come from that environment at all. Nothing like it. Everyone was just wonderful. And never had any problem. They didn't fight. Well, so you can well imagine her influence on me. Now, to give you an idea, after I got through that first date where I couldn't say Carol, I had a hard time with my own name. I'd never like to go inside her house because I might have to talk. That stayed with me all through school. I didn't want to go in there. Only if I had to go in there because I knew I would have difficulty. The pressure was too much on me. But with Carol, this is what happened. All the time that I have known her, a 7.5-year courtship before we were married, and after, she never mentioned the word stuttering once to me. Nor did she ask me any questions about my impediment. She saw me have moments of real, I call it just savage impairment or aberration with my speech. And it kept getting worse, not better, as time went on. So time was working against me. Now, it reached the apex in high school. The kids liked me, and I took seminary for 4 years. In the junior year, they chose me to be the chair king, but they also chose me to be the president of the seminary. Now, I thought that was pretty neat. I'm the president of the seminary, and it was built right across the street from the high school. Separate building, very, very nice, 2 teachers. It's a lovely building. You just couldn't ask for a better situation. And I took the same teacher all 4 years. She took the same teacher all 4 years, and it was the other teacher. So she was with Mr. Brown. I was with Ben E. Call. Ben E. Call. Don't kiss a girl until after you're married. I heard that. I don't know how many times. I thought that was the biggest bunch of baloney in the world. But anyway, that's me. So, there we go. But that's as far as I went with her. I learned the president of the seminary has to speak to the graduating class at the annual banquet of those that graduate at the end of the year. Now, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have allowed myself to even be considered to be the president of the seminary. So that became the last and most impressive moment of stuttering in my life in terms of how it affected me. So as I approached that moment of having to stand up there in front of those parents, part of which there'll be Carol's mother and father there, Carol will be there, and I'm going to have to say something worthwhile. And so I tried to pump myself up. And with different types of, let's say, literary inducements to help elevate me so that I can go into that moment successfully. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win, and you think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. Think big and you will grow. Think small and you'll fall behind. Think that you can, and you will. It's all in the state of mind. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. Well, that became my premise, my motto. I have remembered that all of my life. But as the date neared, and I was quoting that to myself, I found myself becoming sick. I guess they call it a psychosomatic illness. So all this pumping myself up and all this thinking I can do it, it seemed to not quite make it with me. And now it's a week before I have to do it. And I find myself in bed, sick. And I was sick. And now we're 3 days out. And I tell my mother, Mother, I do not want to embarrass anyone that's in attendance, which more than anything else would be Carol and her mother and her father. I'm sick. I was sick. I can't do it. Will you call Brother Benny Call and tell him that I will not be at that graduation ceremony? I believe that this became the most cowardice act of my entire life. I chickened out, to be honest about it. Well, she did. And so the vice president, who was John Groberg, and John Groberg was my wife's first date, he spoke in my place. And I was brokenhearted. I stayed home. Well, John Groberg went on and became a general authority. Me, I won the girl. I got the girl. So I feel that everything turned out fine. Now I'm in BYU. Why did I go there in the first place? I was a pretty good boxer. And the University of Idaho were looking for boxers. And I was, at my weight, an extremely good boxer, because I didn't lose fights. And to my knowledge, only lost one. And I fought the kid a second time, and they stopped the fight. So I won on a TKO. Now, but I didn't care about that. I only wanted to know one thing. How can I overcome stuttering? Because if I can't overcome stuttering, I can't go on a mission. I don't think I will be worthy to marry Carol, because how am I going to support her if I really can't talk? And I'm getting worse. 3, I just won't amount to a hill of beans if I remain a stutterer. Mother checked things out. She's that kind of a woman, just overflowing with initiative, and all that is just doing the right thing without being told. That's what initiative means. Well, anyway, according to Elbert Hubbard, So if she calls BYU, University of Utah, she called University of Idaho. I don't know all the places she called for sure. But she called probably 4 or 5 universities. The one that offered the most over the phone was BYU. In my mind, I believed that BYU means Brigham Young University. This is the Lord's University. It believes that the glory of God is intelligence. And so do I. Boy, I know. I had no doubt. I did not have one doubt that by going there, I am going to overcome this impediment. I'm going to become a new person. And I'll be able to go on that mission. I'll be able to marry Carol, and I'll be able to build my sign company, and I'll be able to mount to a little more than a tiny hill of beans. Well, I get there. First day of school. There I am. I'm on the back row in a corner, and I am all slouched down so no one will see me. At Idaho Falls High School, man, everybody knew me. They all knew I stuttered, and we got along just fine because I laughed with them, and then that's the way it was. And I was kind of outspoken. I was very aggressive, and I found that when I tried to talk, and the more I talked, I could kind of get in a rhythm. It's like a basketball player, and all of a sudden he's in a zone, and he can't miss a shot. And if I get going enough, I'm able to talk without stuttering. And I particularly was able to talk without stuttering with Carol. So you can imagine how I clinged to that woman. Plus, I was attracted to her just like a magnet. That's the way it was. In walks David Yarn, the teacher. He has a clipboard. He said, "We will begin with prayer." Looks down there and he said, "Doug Snarr, will you give the opening prayer?" I don't believe I've ever heard anything that shocked me as much as to hear my name called out by David Yarn to give a prayer. My first day at school at BYU. Like a robot, I walked to the aisle, up to the front of that class. It was packed. Turned around, folded my arms, bowed my head, and started to exert with all the energy I had, and nothing came out. Not even a grunt. It's what is called a speech block. Speech blocks can become so serious where air does not exhale, neither can you inhale, and sometimes it can be so severe that the stutterer faints because of the lack of air and of the effort that he's dispensing and the failure that he is experiencing. Well, David Yarn walks over, puts his arm around me. I firmly feel him holding me, and he says the prayer, and I walk back to the seat. Kids were all just kind of, like they looked but didn't look, The kids didn't know what to do. Well, there's nothing they could do. But I felt all those eyes staring at me, and not particularly in a very positive way, but not necessarily a negative way. In a pitiful way, which is worse than any. So I get in my corner, and next to me was a kid named Alan Miner from Grantsville, Utah. I'll always remember Alan Miner. I'll always love him. Doubles up his fist, and he hits me right on my leg, this left leg. He says, "Snarr, we all love you." I thought that was pretty good. Walked out at the end of the class. David Yarn stops me. He apologizes, says profusely, "Doug Snarr, I apologize. I'll never call on you to speak again. Please know you can come to my class. I'll never embarrass you again. Please keep coming. And I nodded my head in the affirmative. He says, we have a wonderful program for speech therapy. Well, I already knew all of that. I was enrolled in that program. And that was later on in the day, the first class. So I go, whole bunch of kids there. We're all stuttering, all of us. So we shared that in common. And then I looked around, and we started to learn a little bit about what stuttering was. Well, I already knew what stuttering was to me, and I particularly didn't care to know what it was to anybody else, because I'm not there to help them overcome their stuttering. I'm there that they will help me, that is the teachers, with my stuttering. That's all I wanted to know. But it drug on. A few days went by. Now we're into the next week. And this is dragging on. I get reminded of Shakespeare, it's a lot about nothing. But all I care about is, I don't care about the sophistries of the impediment. I only care about the characteristics of its overcoming or being overcome. I want to get rid of it. I hated it. It was my worst enemy. That's all I cared about. I wanted to kill it. Well, so then in the second week, a little bit toward the end of the week, a graduate student who stuttered took me in a car from the campus down to Center Street to J.C. Penney's. I said, now, Doug, here's what you do. You walk in that store, and the waiter or whatever will come up and ask you, can I help you? You say yes, but you stutter the word yes. And look at whatever you want to look at. Now, of course, you're not going to buy anything, but you're going to ask questions. And we want you to stutter on every word that you say, on purpose. I did that. So when I finished, got out on the street, she said, you did perfect. You stuttered wonderfully well. You stuttered on every word. And all I could think about, if you're drunk and you want him to overcome his drunkenness, you don't say, drink all this liquor and hand him a big bottle, whatever that bottle is, Jack Daniels or whatever it is. Because that's not going to help in my mind. So I couldn't understand the logic of this. Well, I found out later in the day, we went back to the school. The idea is this. When you stuttered on purpose, who was in control? Was your impediment in control, or were you in control? Now, if you can control your stuttering in as much as you tell yourself to stutter, you can also control your impediment by telling yourself you're not going to stutter. That's the biggest pile of bullshit in the world. And that's what they thrust upon me. Now, while we're at it, I'm going to define the word bullshit, because I use that word selectively, and I've chosen that word purposefully to explain beautifully what I consider the reality of what I experienced. What is bull? Most everybody I talk to say, well, a bull is a male cow. I said, like, impossible. A cow is female. So how can a bull be a male cow? Well, you know what I mean. I said, yes, what you're really saying is it's a male bovine. I always say that's true. But words have denotations, but they have connotations. Bull has two denotations. One is it is a male bovine, but also bull is what was used when the Pope of Rome would issue an edict to his clergy and the membership of the Catholic Church. That was called a bull, and every history book worth its salt will recognize that and characterize it as such. It's a bull. That's what it was called, because it's predominant. The bull is predominant. And hence these words that are in that papal letter, that's what the dictionary says, papal letter, to help define what a bull is. So what would happen is the clergy would get this bull. Well, human nature being what it is, they'd look at this bull. Oh, brother, here comes another one of these. What we can do and can't do, and, blah, blah, blah. And many would say, shit. So the dictionary also characterizes the word shit to mean nonsense, as well as in something that we get rid of because the body doesn't need it. So bullshit is a declaration of nonsense. And that's what I had experienced. A declaration of nonsense in a transcendent manner. And now, I didn't believe that they could help me. And it was about a week later. And in this week, I came within a hair of having BYU destroy my life. And I wouldn't be sitting here on any means if I'd have listened to what I was going to be told. And it was the following. Mr. Snarr, this is Dr. Jex, ahead of the entire program. By the way, I liked him. He was very, very kind man. But he had that look about him that you know that he was highly educated and well informed on the subject. But he was informed on the subject of stuttering. I didn't care about that. I only cared about what the narrow but most important aspect was. What is involved in the process of overcoming the phenomenon or impediment of stuttering? That's all I cared about. Everything else was pure fluff. Redundant fluff. Joke. There's enough books written on the subject would fill this room that we're sitting in through history. Fluff. Mr. Snarr. Science does not know why people stutter. What came to my mind? I care what the Lord says. Because science, they're out there having to experiment. The Lord only deals with truth. I didn't hear that. Science doesn't know why people stutter. Nobody knows why people stutter. There is no known cure for overcoming stuttering. I must be honest with you. You will stutter all the days of your life. Now, I don't want you to get upset about this. Don't get upset. Settle down. He could feel that I was all of a sudden just starting to, that Annabelle Snarr, my mother, that was in me, which I'm so grateful I have a lot of that stuff in me. Or I'm not scared of anybody. That was in me. And it started to foam up inside me. And I think he could tell by my eyes and just by total being that I was ready for war. And then he said, Everybody has a problem. Yours happens to be stuttering. Some people have a wart on the end of their nose. Some people are a hair lip. Whatever it might be, some people are not quite as quick and as smart as others. Some people have a missing finger. Everyone has a problem. What we will do here in this program is to teach you how to live with your impediment so your impediment does not destroy you. And you know, in that moment, he just about had me. But he didn't have me. And I stood. And I screamed, "Have you ever stuttered?" He said, "No." "Then you don't know how I feel, or anyone else feels who stutters. And if it's the last thing I do on this earth, I will prove you wrong." And I was standing, I turned, and I walked to the door, and I walked out of that building. Before I got to the doorway that led me out of the building, one of the students ran after me. I'll never forget this. And he grabbed me by the arm, stopped me, said, "Please, stay. They really helped me. And if you will stay, they'll really help you." I can't remember what I said, if anything. Probably one word, no. But what I felt was, they're all a bunch of losers. And I'm not going to associate my life and put my life in the hands of losers. And when I left that building, that was indeed the worst day of my entire life. And the reason it was the worst day of my entire life, because I now knew and understood what it is to live without hope. Hope had vanished. And when one loses hope, despair sets in. And when despair sets in, people die. They might not fall dead where they're buried 6 feet under, but internally, they die. And I was on that edge. And that's what I meant by BYU came within the width of a hair in destroying my life. But it didn't. Because in that same breath, I said, if it's the last thing I do on this earth, I will prove you wrong. So I had now established a goal. He says stuttering cannot be cured. He says I will always stutter. He says that basically I am finished. But BYU, and having that thrown at me, this became the monumental transcendent tipping point of my entire life. I either go back, and he is right, or somehow I go forward and I prevail. But in the moment, I had no clue of what was going to happen in the future. Well, time went on. I made it a point to be kind of the last kid that comes to the various classes. The first one to kind of leave, especially when we went to church, which I hated the idea of going, because I might be asked to pray again. I didn't have to worry about David Yarn. He was on my side. And so therefore I'm really, let's say, I'm just a kind of a non-entity sitting there in the classroom. But I liked him. He died at just within the last 4 years. I cut out his obituary out of the paper. It was amazing, his obituary. Now I'm wandering around the campus like a lost sheep. But yet, I had my roommates, And I joined the Val Heinrich social unit. That was very helpful for me. And the kids kind of rallied around me. I don't necessarily think I told the story to any of the social unit members, because I didn't want people starting to feel sorry for me. I didn't want to be one of these guys running around, guess what, I've been picked on, whatever it is. I mean, I had to be a man to stand in there. I mean, after all, I've climbed through the ropes in a boxing match with someone that I never knew anything about, and he's going to come out and try and kill me, and I had to go after him. And I know what it's like to slug out things in life. And I know that's the reality of life, and I'm grateful for that. And that helped me to deal with a position, the situation that I was in, which really was exceedingly uncomfortable. Well, the miraculous thing was about 6 weeks before, maybe a little longer, could have been maybe nearly 2 months before the school year was out, I was in a barbershop. And the magazine, there's a whole bunch of magazines, dog-eared magazines, while you're waiting your turn to get a haircut. And the magazine was titled True, True, True Magazine. Picked it up, opened it up, a little tiny ad with a black background, solid black, and white lettering. It was white on black, that was it. So it popped off the page. And it just said, Stuttering Cured. Benjamin M Bogue Institute, Indianapolis, Indiana. Gave the address, Circle Tower, blah, blah, blah. And then it said, send for free booklet. I took that magazine and I ran out of that barbershop. And I ran to my little apartment, and there were 6 of us, all from Idaho Falls. I was the only freshman. And I shot a letter off to the Benjamin M Bogue Institute. A package came back. It consisted of testimonials, along with the situation, which was $1,000 to enter into the school. But the $1,000 would hold as long as you wanted to stay. If you wanted to stay 2 months, it's $1,000. If you want to stay 6 months, it's $1,000. But you pay for your own board and room, and they have a place for you to stay. Well, these letters came back of various people who had overcome their impediment through the Bogue Institute's methodology of dealing with stuttering. I got so excited that I hitchhiked home, and I showed this magazine along with its ad to my parents. Well, immediately my mother, being who she is, she starts to call these universities that she had called earlier. They all concurred that this was a school of quackery, that Benjamin M Bogue cannot cure stuttering, because stuttering cannot be cured. And all he'll do is take the money. He's a fake. He has no diplomas. He's not certified. He hasn't gone through the strictures of the college program to deal with stuttering, and to avoid him at all cost. Well, my mother and dad met with me, and this was about a week later, and they said, Doug, we are against this program. All the information that we can get is that he will only take the money and you'll be left with nothing. So therefore, if you go, which is up to you, you're going to earn the money and you're going to pay for it. Now, $1,000 in today's money, we're looking between $15,000 to $20,000. So I said to them, I'm going to go even if I have to crawl. So what I did was, following the school year, I stayed in the school till the school year had ended. I just didn't go to the stuttering program anymore. But I did like the religion classes very much. But the class I loved the most was Glenn Turner, the teacher instructor of watercoloring. He also taught oil painting. But watercoloring was my medium. It fit my personality. I like to make quick decisions and go with it. Well, Don Bybee, my mouthpiece, we went to work. Now, the terrible thing was that Carol went to Utah State. Both of her parents graduated from Utah State. She's from a very educated family in those days, exceedingly so. Well, my parents didn't graduate from any college, so they were farmers. My mother was proud to be a farmer. She loved being a farmer. She liked she liked just the work of it. She liked it. But she was highly educated because she was so driven, and she was, as I've already mentioned, she was an avid reader. Boy, did she read, and she knew what to read. Well, Carol and I meet. We just can't wait to meet with each other. She's from Utah State. I'm from BYU. BYU let out a little bit earlier. So Don Bybee and I, we were in the flow of trying to get business where we could make some money so I can go to the stuttering school. That was the whole objective. Now, she comes home. I don't know what happened. She doesn't know what happened. But she found out that I had a real strong will because we broke up. And this time, Joy's heart was in the middle of all the previous breakups, was not in play in this situation. Little Joyce, who lived across the street, was no longer part of the program. I never called, nor did I inquire one thing about Carol. I only had one goal. That was, I'm going to earn the money no matter what I do, nor how long and hard I have to work, I can pay for that school. Now, I sent a letter off, told him I'd like to be there somewhere around the first part of September. Well, basically, I had 90 days, and I had to produce. Well, at the end of the 90 days, I had the $1,000, and I had a little extra to help pay for my board and room. Don Bybee had his share. It was a miraculous 90 days. Not one word from Carol or to Carol. Then when I get down in Pocatello to get on the train to go back to Indianapolis, never been on a train in my life, they had sent a letter saying that what I'm to do is to put on a little yellow tag, a piece of cloth. So when I get to Indianapolis, they'll be able to see who I am, and I don't have to ask questions. And who picks me up will be a lady named Mrs. Love, and Mrs. Love will be wearing one of these little white things on her dress. So my dad said to me, Doug, you better come back a-talking. A lot better than you're a-going. When I got on that train, I made this decision to myself. I will not come back. If by chance they're not able to help me overcome this impediment, I will remain in Indianapolis. I'm not going to come back home. I can't face anybody. So this became a deep-seated, determined goal that was part of every fiber of my being. Now, on the train, when I wanted anything, I wrote it out on a piece of paper. I had a little pad there, and I just tear it off. I want a hamburger, medium rare. I don't think I said that in those days, but it's the way it would have been now. But I would say a lot of extra mustard and a lot of salt and pepper. And I love pickles, but I really want the tomato stick on there. Well, I finally make it to Indianapolis. I see Mrs. Love. She drives me right to Circle Tower. So it's kind of a center circle right in the middle of Indianapolis. And all that was the ideal location in those days. That was it, Circle Tower. And the building was the building that Benjamin M Bogue was in. Now he had a little office, which was one room by himself, kind of a small lobby area with some chairs, and then a little tiny room for Mrs. Love. That was it. And I was brought in. I'd never gone to 4 stories before in my life, but we were 4 stories up, and I can't remember the height of the building, but I think it was around 8 stories, maybe 10. But it was definitely the building at the time. I'm now in the room with Mr. Benjamin M Bogue himself, the quack, the one that doesn't have any degrees. He's no good. We're better than he is. We have diplomas. And those diplomas that they had on stuttering were, as Shakespeare would say, all about nothing. Well, I hand him the check, a registered check, to him. And he looked at me and he said, "This check will prove to be the best investment you'll ever make in your life. Because when you leave here, you'll know how to deal with the speech block and what it takes to speak stutter-free." And there was a chair that I sat down, which faced him, and I put my head into my hands, and I was uncontrollable. I just bawled, because I had gone through so much, and so much was at stake. I either leave Indianapolis and go back, or I stay here. It's one of the two. You can't have your cake and eat it too, Doug. You can't have it both ways. And I'm going to go. I'm going all the way. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. That was Kipling from If. And that's where I was. Well, I never saw Mr. Bogue after that. I probably was in there at the most 15 minutes. He talked to me. I'd say he was nearing 80 years of age, 78, 76, somewhere in that neighborhood. He had a lot of white hair, and it was beautiful, beautiful white mane. Had a very soft look, a very tender look. And I was taken by the gentleness of his spirit. But he did emanate light. I could feel his light. I'm thinking right now of the words of Tennyson describing King Arthur in the great poem, epic poem, Idylls of the King. What the king so prized and overprized was gentleness. That was Benjamin Bogue. Now, Mrs. Love takes me. We go from the center of Indianapolis to on the outskirts of Indianapolis, of the center part of the town, not in a suburb by any way. It's still in the center part of the town, but it's on the outskirts. It's in the poor rent district. It's where the buildings had that tumble down look. And we went up a flight of stairs, boy, that we could hardly see. And it seemed to me that they weren't symmetrical. It just kind of had a little bit of a, you could tell that they'd been there for probably 100 years. And we get into the room. It's not much bigger than this whole room right here. And there was chairs, iron folding chairs, rimmed around the room. And at one end was a little platform of about 6 inches, and in the center was a microphone. And here were the students. And they were now taking turns speaking into that microphone. Now, I won't describe this part of it right now. I'll save that to when I find myself there. But I got to meet him, or I should say her. Now, she was, I've guessed at this, I'd say a good 72 years of age. She was as plain as any woman I've ever seen in my life. There was no makeup on her face, there's no lipstick or nothing. And she had, her hair was kind of in ringlets, but not real beautiful ringlets. It's just kind of shaggy ringlets. And she was blind. She couldn't see. But could she hear? Her dress was extremely plain. I'd say about 6 inches off the ground or the floor. And her voice was commanding, but not harsh. It was commanding but pleasant. She had a smile, and she expressed real excitement to having me join, because there were 3 students she was teaching. Now I became the 4th one. And so they had been there before me. There was one girl, and she had been there for quite a while. And evidently, I learned later that she was really having to struggle, but was making definite progress. But the progress was incremental and exceedingly slow, but it was definitely uphill. So time was on her side. So all she needed was the guts and the staying power to hang with it. Staying power, a lot of starting power in this world. Ain't much staying power when it gets down to it. Well, then she takes us to a place about a mile away, and this is the boarding house. Then I'm introduced there. We all have little rooms. We're just serve food family style. We have one meal in the morning and one meal at night. And we all shared the food. Well, to be honest with you, I was the youngest one. I'd wait. They'd all end up leaving, going. There'd be a little bit left over. I'd polish it all off. So all the food was consumed. I never left hungry. I was always just really, really full, comfortable. The idea is this. If you could say to me, well, what is the concept? They never gave us one piece of paper. We were never told what the concept was. We only would stand up there in front of that microphone. And the phenomenon is, and the concept is, that all stutters are filled with fear. And all books that have been written on the subject is that if we can take and minimize or mitigate the fear within one, proportionately, what would happen is that stuttering would reduce, consistent with the lessening of the fear. So you lessen your stuttering, pursuant to you lose the fear first, and then you'll lose stuttering second. Now, it wasn't until years later that I realized what really happened was this. What they did was they started you off so basically and so simple, is with like one syllable that you're able to say, and you take one breath of air to say that syllable, and you also say it within the time frame of about between 2 to 3 seconds. And what establishes rhythm in the body is that you swing your arm in a half circle. This is pretty important here. You got your fingers like this in your hand. You put these 3 fingers in your hand, and you have your forefinger and your thumb free. Then as you start to swing, these come together, and you complete the sound like that. Then you open up. You breathe through the nose again. Then, and this is a pause, and the pause is as long as you want it to be. And then you start that second sound or syllable. Now, some people stutter so severely they can't do that. What they do is mouth it. They don't utter a sound, they only pretend that they're saying, but they're mouthing it. But they're getting and learning the art of the swing and the art of the utterance. But they are mouthing the sound, and they exhale all the air without expressing a sound. Pause, go through that, and then they start over again. Now let me show you. You stop, hands like this. Breathe through the nose. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. My name. It has to be monotone. That is critical. Is Doug. You get the idea. Now, each person is a little bit differently, and it's kind of watching them each perform. They each perform in the morning and each perform in the night. If you got 4 students and you're going to be there 8 hours, then therefore it's 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon. Or I should say an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. Practicing. So you start right off practicing. But the secret is this. When you go there, you go on a silence for 10 days. You utter nothing, not even a grunt, for 10 full days. You forget the past of what you were. Now you're recreating a new speech pattern. And the concept is this. What reduces fear, and the only thing that will reduce fear, is that you don't stutter. So by not stuttering, you reduce the fear. And what happens is that you establish within the brain a new speech center. Because your old speech center is nothing except spaghetti. And you can't smooth that out. You're not going to unspaghettyize that speech center. So you create a new speech center. And once you do that, you then are in the process of creating a new stutter-free speech habit, because stuttering is a habit known as a born with stuttering. I started at age 5. If you've seen the movie The King's Speech, the Duke of York, who became George VI, started stuttering at age 8. So it varies. Now, the former head of the or president of the University of Utah started to stutter his sophomore year in high school, Chase Peterson. And I've had many discussions with him. He's been in this house several times talking this whole subject with me. And so it is an unusual phenomenon, and it all varies. Therefore, I say this: if you have the power to start stuttering, like driving a car into a garage, you have the power to be able to back the doggone car out. And so you're not bit by a mosquito and now you stutter. It's how it begins, and that is not the issue. The only thing that counts is let's just back the doggone car out of the garage. And that's what it was all about with Bogue Institute, is backing the car out of the garage. Now let me put it to you this way. There's a scripture on this, which I think tells exactly what we're talking about. It's in the 28th chapter of Isaiah. Being a Mormon, we've been commanded over and over again to study the words of Isaiah. Great are the words of Isaiah. Isaiah is quoted in the New Testament more than any other Old Testament prophet. He is quoted more in the Book of Mormon than any other prophet, except those characters in the Book of Mormon, and on we go. But people can't understand Isaiah because Isaiah uses terminology in his day to explain our day. And he talks about Salt Lake City, and he talks about Utah, and he talks about America, and he talks about our opposition, but he doesn't use those words because those words didn't exist. So he uses words in his day. So when he talks about America, say America, he says Egypt. And that just gives you an idea. So now I'm in the 28th chapter. And in that 28th chapter of Isaiah, it talks about this. It talks about line upon line. Starts off by saying, for it is precept with precept. Precept with precept. He quotes that statement twice. Then he says line upon line and line upon line. He says that twice. And then he says here a little and there a little. And then he says, for with stammering lips will I teach this people in another tongue. What does that mean? But there it is. The whole formula is right there. Right there. The words of God through Isaiah. Now, precept means rule or a governing principle. So you got to follow a rule or a governing principle. Now, line upon line, that means practice. And here a little and there a little, that means that you're not going to have complete smooth sailing. But you'll learn the process in increments. And the key to the thing is to stick with it. And so with stammering lips means that you're not finished. Because with stammering lips, will I teach this people? And how is he going to do that? Is with another tongue. What's another tongue? Imagine 2 cylinders right here. One is stuttering. And every day that goes by you stutter, all you do is increase the severity of your habit. And therefore your stuttering becomes worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And all these books and everything that come out and all these teachers and professors in these universities don't understand that what you do is forget about that stammering column. Because you go over here and you create a new speech pattern. a new way to speak. It is another tongue, precisely. And then you establish this another tongue, and in that context, you're able to teach. Now, I admit that Moses stuttered. He did not learn another tongue, but nevertheless he did. And because he had the power of the Spirit so strong, and he was given lucidity, the ability to speak in those moments, but he had to have Aaron to be his mouthpiece. And Aaron was his mouthpiece. But Moses called the shots. Now, it's that simple, isn't it? So all I'm doing here is creating another way to say another sound, and I go over to this second column, and by little tiny increments, it is you pile success upon success. You speak stutter-free, day after day, line upon line, month after month, line upon line, until you establish a way to speak stutter-free in another tongue. So if I have a relapse and stutter, I have gone back to my former way of speaking. It's all different. It is completely different. In this way, you probably have observed, I speak deliberately. I basically do not run these syllables into each other too quickly, or otherwise I'm not in another tongue. And I see these words in my mind, in their syllable configurations, before I speak them, every word. That's in my brain. And did it happen overnight? No. But in 4 months, I was able to go back home. To go back home. And not have to stay. In 4 months. Then I started to practice, kept practicing. I had my bad moments, but they became less and less, and fewer, until I have experienced what very few people have ever experienced. I have spoken before thousands, tens of thousands.